Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And please let me, you don't really need much introduction, but let me introduce you anyway. Playwright, librettist, David Henry Hwang. Countertenor, playing M. Butterfly, Justin Kim. Our composer, Huang Ruo. And our director, Jim Robinson. First of all, thank you all for sharing this rare experience with all of us. What you saw tonight really is part of the creative process that happens usually behind closed doors in a rehearsal room. We're just so grateful that you're willing to share this rare experience with us. And I know this is really the second time you've seen this piece together. The first time was last night. From 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. I was there. It was the first time they did a run-through. So thank you so much.
Oh, our pleasure. Thanks for being such a great audience.
Yeah. I'm sure you can feel the love and enthusiasm tonight. This performance was sold out a month ago. And M. Butterfly has generated a lot of advanced buzz. And I want to share this with you to start. There was an editorial in Washington Times that said, and I quote, perhaps, first of all, let me say that the title of the editorial was, "To Save Opera, We Have to Let It Die." Perhaps it's time to decentralize the star system that currently fuels opera. There are plenty of composers, performers, and directors who manage to reflect on the canon, even as they create works that speak to audiences today. Next year, the Santa Fe Opera will give the premiere of Huang Ruo's M. Butterfly, an adaptation of David Henry Hwang's play of the same name, which rethinks Puccini's opera via the lens of a real-life encounter between a French diplomat and a Chinese spy. The Tuscan-born Puccini's themes of exoticism and orientalization will be repurposed by a composer who was born in the Chinese province, an island of Hainan. So let me start with David and Huang Ruo. While you must be encouraged by all these advanced compliments, it also sets a very high bar. For you to share this working rehearsal with us, it must take tremendous confidence as well as courage. Huang Ruo, I want to ask you, what made you choose? Why did you choose David's iconic works, one of his most iconic works, into an opera? I know you've worked together before.
Right.
And David, after Huang Ruo answers this question, can you take us back 21 years ago when you first created M. Butterfly and contextualize it for our contemporary audience?
So I went to Oberlin for my undergrad, and I remember one day I saw a poster of, I forgot, it's half-naked or fully naked Asian man on the poster, and it was a school production of M. Butterfly. I did not know much about it. I went to see it because I was very curious, and my English was really not too good then, and so I get out of it confused in a way, by the plot, of course. So that strikes me quite deeply to see, to me it's a cultural shock, but also cultural clash, but in a theatrical way. So I always remember that, and I know the Chinese butterfly stories quite well, and then know Puccini's Butterfly. And then I had the great fortune to work with David for his The Dance on the Railroad, the earlier play of his. And after that, we had a great time working, and we said, well, why can't we just do an opera, and maybe on one of his plays? So we went through a whole list of things, and at the end I say, why not M. Butterfly? Has anyone done it yet? to my surprise, no one has. And that was the first time we set our eyes on the play. To me, it cries out to be done as an opera.
Has someone tried to do In Butterfly before?
No. I mean, I feel like maybe I was approached some other time, but anyway, I didn't. I sort of dismissed it out of hand if I have.
So take us back 21 years ago. It premiered in 1988, am I correct?
It premiered in 88, which I think means it's 30.
Oh my goodness, I can't. I can't do math tonight.
It's okay, I don't, it's sad to be that old, but great. Anyway, so as I was saying earlier, I did hear the story initially at a cocktail party. It's the sort of story one would hear at a cocktail party. And I immediately thought, oh, this could make a great play, because I usually start writing a play out of a question. And there's a very obvious question here, the question everybody hears when they encounter the story, which is, how could the diplomat not have known? How could the diplomat not have known the gender of his lover? So I thought about this for actually about a year, and I was driving around one day, and I asked myself, oh, what did this diplomat think that he'd found? And the answer came to me, oh, he probably thought he'd found his version of Madame Butterfly. And at that point, the idea of dovetailing the events of the spy story and the plot of Madame Butterfly seemed like an interesting way to get at this material. I should add that at that point, I'd never really heard, I'd never heard Madame Butterfly. I grew up in a kind of classical instrumentalist family, but we weren't exposed to a lot of vocal music. So I only really knew it as a cultural stereotype. And I pulled, I had this idea. I was in LA, I was driving, and I pulled into a record store and bought the box set and just started reading the libretto. And there was all sorts of stuff in the libretto that felt really, like this idea was going to work. So I thought at the beginning of the play, the Frenchman would fantasize that he was Pinkerton, that he'd found his butterfly, and that by the end of the piece, the Frenchman would realize it's actually he who's butterfly, in that it's he who was deceived by love, and the Chinese spy who perpetrated that deceit was therefore the real Pinkerton.
So let's talk about the cultural stereotypes and the gender expressions. You were absolutely groundbreaking at the time with M. Butterfly. How was it first received?
I mean, we first did it out of town in Washington, D.C., and it got pretty bad reviews, particularly from the Washington Post. And so the production started hemorrhaging money. One of our co-producers wanted to pull the show and not bring us into New York. The other co-producer then abrogated their partnership agreement and mortgaged his house to get us to Broadway. So it's one of these, sort of dramatic theater stories that happens to have a happy ending. But really, critics were split right down the middle. Fortunately, Frank Rich in the New York Times really liked the play, although he didn't like the production that much. So the show started to be a hit, and then we won the Tony Award and ran for a couple of years.
But let's visit the second issue, the cultural stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
In your libretto, when the French judge asked Song Liling how it was possible for Gallimard to have believed that he was a woman for so long, Song Liling says, "The West believes it is masculine, powerful, strong. So the East is feminine, submissive, lotus blossom, or dragon lady. The West believes the East wants to be dominated because a woman cannot think for herself." To which the judge says, I don't think we didn't play the scene tonight, to which the judge then says, how does any of this explain how you fooled Gallimard? Song Liling says, 1, he wanted to believe his fantasy woman was actually a woman. 2, I am an Oriental, and being an Oriental, I can never be truly a man. So,
yeah,
talk to us.
Right. I mean, I guess what I was getting at was the sort of the sort of binary feminization of the East by the West, particularly during the period of colonialism, and even up until the time the original show opened. So this notion of kind of inherent Western superiority became codified in gendering the East and West. And so by attempting to pick that apart, and Butterfly, I guess, was an early example of intersectionality, looking at gender issues as related to racial and cultural issues.
So Huang Ruo, how did you translate that, visualize that in your musical language, in your composition?
Well, to me, in a way, when we do an opera of M Butterfly, it should be different from the play. It's not contrasting to the play, but transform the play with music. So to me, the gender issue, the culture issue, they're still there in the opera. But with music, it goes beyond that. So it became one man's fantasy, but in that head, no matter he loves a woman or loves a man, but he just loves the image of what he created. So the issue is there, but with music, I want to bring it all together in a seamless unity. So in that way, that's what music can offer, to tell the drama through sounds and through music.
I know we didn't hear the overture today.
Right.
But tell us, what did you do to the overture?
You mean the very, very beginning?
Yes.
Overture?
You turned Madama Butterfly upside down.
Oh, yes.
And inside out.
So what happened is the Madama Butterfly overture, I flipped it, in composition, being nerdy a little bit, there's a technique called inversion, right? If you want to learn that, inversion. So instead of da-di-la-la, 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 so I do da-da-di-la-la, da-da-di-la-la. So I not only turn it upside down, but also I change the note to make it Eastern. So this tune, for those of you who know the original opera, it comes as a shadow in your head. But then when it does it, it becomes a Chinese operatic tune. So it becomes, in a way, a little motif for song in his Eastern side. So you always hear the so it becomes a fugue, this or that. So that's one technique I use to not just directly quote Puccini, but do something to it to really grind it down and then regrow it.
Yeah, I sort of had the thought last night that M Butterfly is sometimes thought to deconstruct Madame Butterfly, and I feel that Huang Ruo's opera reconstructs it.
So let's talk about reconstructing the butterfly. Justin.
Yeah.
I know B.D. Wang you had a chance to meet B.D. Wang, who was here. Is he still here?
No, I think he had to go.
He
seemed very happy.
The original M Butterfly was with us during the performance and went backstage. Yeah. And we have a wonderful, beautiful photo of the two butterflies beating together. And Justin, you really personified the operatic version of M Butterfly to create this legendary role in opera. And that gorgeous and let's talk about that gorgeous countertenor aria in Act 4.
Yeah. I mean, what an honor to be able to just be able to sing such gorgeous piece that not only gets you musically, but with the text, with everything. It is just like such a full body experience for me, singing that aria, because I don't consider myself like a method actor, or I usually feel very detached from the roles that I portray, but I can't help myself but really go through the metamorphosis while singing that aria with the... It is really just an incredible experience, and really thank you, and thank you.
What was it like to meet BD? right before you go on stage for the first time to sing this aria to the public?
Well, I was just like, sorry. Yeah, but that's how I felt first. And then I hope I do justice to words cannot really describe how grateful I am for M Butterfly, because as an Asian American kind of growing up in Chicago, and it was my hopes and dreams to be on Broadway, to do musical theater before I found opera. And M Butterfly was this piece that let me know that I am visible. That there are parts out there that as an Asian man, as a gay Asian man, I can be seen in front of people without having to put on covers and costumes to westernize myself to fit into certain roles, but just be as I am. And that's what song wanted as well. And there were just so many parallels that I found, like bootleg recordings of the play and saw it and cried. And I, having had that experience and seeing BD right before going on to present this to the public, speechless.
A fantasy,
Yeah.
a dream.
Dream come true. Dream come true. Yeah.
That's great.
Jim,
Yes.
first of all, congratulations on a tremendous success at the Metropolitan Opera with Porgy and Bess.
Oh, well, thank you.
From directing an opera from a repertory opera to creating a brand new opera, especially an opera with all these aspects that we've talked about, cultural stereotypes, gender identity, the romance, the unequal romance between the West and the East. How do you translate that? How do you plan to visualize this on stage?
Well, first of all, this is now the third collaboration with our wonderful composer, and I had the great privilege of doing Dr. Sun Yat-sen out in Santa Fe a few years ago, and then at Opera Theater of St. Louis we commissioned the expanded version of an opera that David and Huang Ruo had written called An American Soldier. So we took a one-act version of that and expanded it into a two-act version that was very successful. I'm also going to say it was one of the first times a composer has been asked to make an opera longer. So I think that was historical. But anyway, you know, I have to say, I think we're in such an amazingly rich period in the creativity, or the creation, I guess I should say, of new works. And this particular play has always been something I have admired so much. So when Huang Ruo started talking about it being turned into an opera, I always thought opera is the perfect place for something like this to live. And also, it's a timeless story, and there aren't too many plays out there that are turned into operas that are still timeless and the stories still resonate. But I think the way David and Huang Ruo have developed this piece addresses so many things, but ultimately it's really good theater, it's really good opera, it's really good storytelling. Now, one of the challenges, of course, is that it's a very familiar piece, but that could be said anytime I tackle any standard rep piece. You know, if I take on Madame Butterfly or something like that, as a director, there's a huge amount of pressure for something like that because everybody has their idea of what the perfect production of Butterfly is. But I think Santa Fe is an amazing place to present something like this, and you know, they have a terrific history of doing new works and taking chances on things like this. I predict that this is going to be very successful. I was just telling Huang Ruo last night after the the sing-through of the piece, just how proud I am of him as an artist, because I think he has developed so incredibly as an opera composer. And having had the, like I said, the privilege of doing his first opera and visiting him with subsequent pieces, including this, it's great to see his development in this art form. And I'm very excited about that.
Huang Ruo, I have a question from the audience for you.
Yes.
Will there be an orchestra, an actual orchestra in Santa Fe, and how many instruments?
Yes, actually, that's what I want to put a note on as well. This is truly a result of rehearsal of several days. I should mention that all the singers did a fantastic job, and we just come here, rehearse, and then presented this to you. And yes, there will be an orchestra of 35 instruments. And so when I compose opera, I always do the full orchestra version to start. So I don't do a piano short score first. I put every instrument in first. And then the piano version you hear tonight is a reduction I make from the orchestra version. So it could not represent the true M butterfly, of course. And that's why also I would love you all to come to hear the real butterfly. Yes.
I have a question from the audience for Justin. Justin, your nickname is Kimchilia Bartoli. Can you please tell us, how do you go from, was it difficult to go from Baroque music technique to contemporary music? And please tell us how you earned this beautiful nickname.
So for those of you who don't know, Kimchilia Bartoli is my alter ego as the understudy of the great Cecilia Bartoli, but the Korean version, so there's kimchi in the name. And in college, I did this drag act impersonating her as an homage to her greatness, because I think she is one of the most giving artists. And I think for many people think that Baroque singing technique and bel canto singing technique, and these are all different techniques, but it doesn't have to be. It just, singing is an extension of our speech. And through lines that are, we suspend our disbelief that we speak at a certain tempo with certain rhythm. And that in between those syllables, we can communicate something that is more than just words. And that's where operas are born. And it was the same thing when the very first opera was created, and it still rings very true right now. So as long as you are paying attention to the text, and of course you need to have some sort of informed knowledge of the period practice, but at the end of the day, we are still creating, telling a story. And with any technique, you can tell stories in any language. And that's what I try to do. So when I'm impersonating Cecilia Bartoli, I think about her interpretation of a certain aria and why she would say certain things that way. So I go for the intention of her act. And when I am singing Song Li Ling, then I think of the intention of Song herself and why she would say these things. Mm-hmm. And everything else just kinds of, they stack on top of each other.
I think the next question from the audience is for all of you. What has the development creative process been like? The timeline from the beginning, excuse me, I'm trying to read the handwriting. And what is the plan between now and August? By the way, the premiere date is, please put on your calendar, August 1st, 2020 at Santa Fe.
I guess the first thing that happens is that I write an outline, and obviously in this case it's based on my play, but there are things that are different. And so then we go back and, and an outline is just like prologue, and this happens, and then act one, scene one. And then we go back and forth on it for a while.
Right.
Huang Ruo has really good dramaturgical instincts, which is one of the reasons it's fun to work with him. And so a lot of your notes on the outline are very helpful. And also, I believe that part of being a librettist is trying to create something that's going to help the composer to do their best work. So I think it's really important that the composer buys into the libretto.
To add to that, this is our second opera collaboration. Such a joy and to work with David, because the first thing he told me when we start working is, in opera, the composer takes charge. So, and for different composer, I would write the libretto also differently according to the style of the composer. So to me, he understands music. I mean, he himself is a musician as well, for those of you who don't know. We found this is very helpful, and always the key is we started communicating very early on. And then we plan the places where we want to, let's say we want a party scene, we want to have chorus, mixed voices. The next scene, we want a humming chorus. And David is so good at drama, and he would put in his libretto, okay, I want a humming chorus. In the original libretto, he said, the Puccini's humming chorus could use there. I talked to myself, I think, I could do my own humming chorus to show his memory to Beijing. I think would be more appropriate. So in this case, it inspired my writing, but also we are very easy to adapt to each other.
Well, during this process, when they were in the composition process, Huang Ruo would sometimes talk to me and say, we're thinking of something like this. And I would look at the libretto and listen to things that he had written, and I'd say, that's, I totally understand where you're moving. Sometimes what I do when I'm working with composers, because I work with a lot of living composers, is to just make observations about things and to ask them, have the objectives been met in the scene? And these days, every opera composer writes operas that have multiple scenes. That's just the way it is. And Butterfly as a play, but also as an opera, has a lot of scenes. So we needed to be very nimble in our creation of the physical environment once we got down to designing it. And this is a design team that I've worked with many, many times. We did Sun Yat-sen, we did Vanessa out in Santa Fe, and a bunch of other things. And I always say that when you're doing a new piece, you have to build in maximum flexibility, because you never know what's going to change. And sometimes pieces are still being created. For example, this workshop is rather late in the process for us, because we had to present a physical production, the sets and costumes and all of that, in late July in Santa Fe. So we come up with an idea. I talked to Huang Ruo and David about it, what we're thinking of exploring with the physical production. But then we also have to, like I said, build in a lot of flexibility. So if things change, we can be nimble. But I'm very, very happy, because after hearing all of this, I feel like we've made all of the best design choices for the piece.
Will there be changes musically?
Not too many changes.
Working with the singers.
I think we make the necessary change we have made in the past several days. Mm-hmm. So that's the benefit of workshopping, and also is the reason. So, I just want to tell one story was because when Song comes back to France, and you just heard he sang the Umbadi again, and in my memory, I thought that, he should not repeat the same thing. Mm-hmm. So we thought of the idea of, at first I want him to sing the Italian aria, but start changing the words into make-up language. But then throughout the workshop, we noticed, for people who don't know Italian, they thought this was the aria. And for people who do know the Italian, they might think he just had memory slip. So, and I think, and this is a great thing of having a director also come on board, as I think as Jim suggested, what if have the female voices doubling him, and first. And then I used to think of also this idea of just have him hum it. And this also go well with the plan. So that's what you heard, and to have a, off-stage chorus when we do it in Santa Fe to when he was also off stage, and then you hear that tune comes out, and then when he starts singing solo, he starts walking out. So it becomes more and more real. So that's the end result we want. So that's what workshop can help.
An example of something that happened relatively late in our composition process. Huang Ruo had already written Act 1 and Act 2, and then I guess you were working on the moment which is now the countertenor, I'm a butterfly that dreamt he was human. But that didn't exist in the libretto at that point. And Huang Ruo felt, we talked on the phone, and he felt like Sung really needs a moment that's his after he's been sent down for the Cultural Revolution, and he's about to go back to France, and using the ancient Chinese story about the man who dreamt he was a butterfly, we sort of came up with that text. So that beautiful aria for Justin was not in the original libretto. It's an example of Huang Ruo's dramaturgical skill.
We have time for one final question.
Okay.
And I have a fun question for you. I don't know if you heard, it's for all of you. I don't know if you heard the news that Kanye West, Mr. Kim... Kanye, sorry, Kanye West. Did I say what? Mr. Kim Kardashian has decided that his next big project will be conducting an opera. And it's true. Check NPR.
November 24th, Hollywood Bowl.
Hollywood Bowl, and it will be Nebuchadnezzar. What would your advice to him on his operatic debut? Opera must be so hot, right?
Yeah.
So wait. Is he writing an opera, or he's conducting an already existing opera?
He's creating it.
He's writing.
He's writing.
The language is very ambiguous.
Oh.
He's creating it. He's directing it. He may be singing it.
The first thing I would say is he should decide if he's writing it or not.
Yes.
Justin?
My advice would... storytelling is at the core of opera. One must not forget that. It's not just about the music. It's not just about the theatrics. The glamorous lights and costumes, it's storytelling. Without story, there's no opera.
Composer?
Well, being a composer, I would say, again, you are right, story is important. And from what I heard, bits of his life and his wife's life, they have great story to tell. And they could both sing that, or, I think he could conduct and sing, and, he could do it. I think that's the best story he could create.
Jim, you look just dumbfounded.
I would just say good luck. That's just good luck. Yeah.
I think on that note, thank you all, and thank you,
Agnes.
Thank you, Agnes. Thanks, Agnes.